welcome to another encounter. I'm Rami Khouri, your host. I'm delighted to have as my guest today His Excellency Marwan Dudeen. Marwan Dudeen is a senator since 1998, and he has many years of experience in public service. He was a Minister of Agriculture for a few years, and he was Minister of Occupied Territory Affairs, as it used to be called. And I've asked His Excellency Marwan Dudeen to be my guest to talk about the situation in the occupied territories in Palestine, the Israeli-Palestinian relationship with the present attempt to have a ceasefire. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
There's a lot going on. The situation's changing day to day. Let's look at it as it is this weekend. We've just had this agreement that was brokered by the CIA director, George Tenet. There seems to be an attempt to get a ceasefire going. How do you see this? Is this a significant turning point? Are you hopeful that this will lead to a future political resolution of the conflict?
You know, Rami, with the Mitchell report acceptance by the two parties, it seemed at the beginning that a mechanism for getting to implement the recommendations in the Mitchell report seemed to be far, and every party took a very hard position, especially in the two areas of security on the one hand and the political issues on the other hand. Mm-hmm. And I think the Tenet mission is a truce mission, as a matter of fact, because that was the position of the American administration. They almost were much closer to the Israeli point of view that in this area of security, if we achieve what the Israelis wanted to achieve as a full security before getting into any serious talks, then it will be better. Now, as a compromise, the George Tenet plan, I think, for a truce, also under a certain amount of labor, was born only yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I could understand that it is divided into two phases, one very short of 48 hours, 24 hours already have passed, mm-hmm. in which the two parties will give instructions to their people in the field, whether it is the military occupying forces of the Israeli army or the Intifada field demonstrators, the Palestinians rejecting the idea that they are still under occupation. Mm-hmm. Now, after the 2 days elapse, there is a talk about 1 week, mm-hmm. Where the Israelis will come more than the Palestinians under the test of the Tenet ideas when they withdraw whatever military setup they have taken for the last 9 months and redeploy to the October situation of last year.
September 28th.
September 28th. Mm-hmm. Infamous visit of Mr. Sharon to mm-hmm. Al-Haram al-Sharif. Now, if we cross fingers and know that the coming week, 1 day has passed out of 9, things will go on land close to what has been accepted by the two parties, then we should think that the second immediate phase will be Mr. Burns getting the American administration continually involved into the process by getting into the more important issue for the Palestinians and for the cause as a cause, mm-hmm. Getting to into the permanent status talks as per previous agreements and on the basis of 242 and 338, which for the Palestinian party always meant and will continue to mean the end of occupation, mm-hmm. and the establishment of the independent state with Jerusalem as its capital, mm-hmm. with the recognition of the Israeli side of the right of return for the Palestinian refugees. These are the issues of the permanent status talks. But now Burns should continue on the part of the American administration, get heavily involved into this, and we should not actually look at the Mitchell report as a divisible thing. It's an indivisible package deal. It should go every part of it together.
But you mentioned this dichotomy, the two parts of the package, which is the security issues and the political issues. Now, it seems that the Tenet ceasefire plan focuses almost exclusively on the security side of things, and hopefully that will go well in the next week. There will be a ceasefire, but the Israelis will pull back, and that will pave the way for political discussions. But do you see any chance of any progress when you have negotiations on the political issues between the Palestinian leadership and this present Israeli government?
Well, the Tenet ideas that are being implemented, partly at least, as we heard in the news, because they are not being implemented fully, came as an integral part of the implementation or the attempts to implement the Mitchell report recommendations. And within even that truce talk within the Tenet ideas, there is a reference to complete stopping of settlements and building new settlements with an Israeli reservation on what they call the natural growth of the present ones, but with a rejection of the Palestinians and so on and so forth. So within the truce he has tried to make, he made it very clear within the text, which was available to me in translations from Hebrew newspapers, that the settlement issue, the closure, the checkpoints, and the so-called buffer zones. The Israelis have already started establishing no man land in the Palestinian territory, areas A, which again is not acceptable at all. If the talk about separation by buffer zones or no man land is not going to work, in my opinion, although they started it in Gaza. But if the American administration keeps on getting as involved as they are now, with the Burns mission following up immediately on the 9th day from today or the 8th day from today, then I should be hopeful that this involvement, with the fact that the intifada per se will continue, maybe minus using firearms. I believe it is the right of the Palestinians to continue to demonstrate and to do all the civil show of anger because they are under occupation, provided that this anger doesn't come to the point of using armed fire and
civil disobedience.
Yes.
Civil disobedience
this is
and peaceful demonstration.
I think if this kind of arrangement can be made, the two parties should be able to reach to a point where they have to talk political. It's a political issue.
Yeah, we will talk more about that in a minute when we continue. My guest is Marwan Dudeen, Senator. We will be back in a minute. If you just joined me, this is Encounter. I'm Rami Khouri. My guest is Marwan Dudeen, member of the Senate and former Minister of Occupied Territories Affairs, a person in Jordan who has spent most of his life since 1958 in public service and very knowledgeable about the Palestinian issue. Given this reality of having to move back to the political discussions after the ceasefire, the positions that the Sharon government has put on the table, at least now, seem totally unacceptable to any kind of political agreement. They're talking about 40% of the territories being returned, no sharing of Jerusalem, etc. What do you expect will happen when we do get to the point of the political negotiations?
Well, Rami, you know, this idea of the Israeli side wanting this and not wanting that, insisting on this and not insisting on that, has been going with us since Madrid, actually. You know, Mr. Shamir did not want to go to Madrid, but he went to Madrid. You know that all the right in Israel, as represented by Mr. Sharon and his Likud party, was against even the Oslo principles. But the Oslo principles were partly implemented. They were against the birth of a Palestinian entity altogether. The Palestinian entity, whether they liked it those days and they still don't like it, I think now, is there. I have doubts personally that Mr. Sharon, the mentality of Mr. Sharon, the present coalition in Israel under the upper hand of the Likud party and Mr. Sharon personally will really like to see the peace process resumed. I think they would use different techniques of delay, different techniques of obstruction to really interrupt the peace process, because in the final calculation, the peace process will have to get into the permanent status talks, which are an integral part of all what have been agreed upon since Madrid. And when you come to these final status subjects or permanent status solutions, then you are talking really about a state of Palestine, an independent state of Palestine. You are talking about Jerusalem as a capital. You are talking about the return of refugees. You are talking about sovereignty in knowing where the borders are, with the assistance of the Palestinians decide to put the borders back to the June 4, 67 borders. Now,
and also an end to settlements.
Who in the right side and the extremist side of the right side of Israel really wants this to be resumed? I don't believe that Mr. Sharon is honest at all if he ever proclaims that he wants the peace process to be resumed and the permanent status issues be discussed.
So
because you could see what they did with Barak when he went to Camp David the last time, and he was ready at least to give 90% of the land, and he was not ready to recognize even the refugees and to recognize the sovereignty of Jerusalem. Even with giving 90% of the land of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, they were so unhappy and they were against it. And you remember the voting in the Knesset. They were against it. So why should I believe now that Mr. Sharon will like to see the peace process resumed? But who says that all what has been going on since 91, the Madrid peace process, is to the liking of people who are of the like of Sharon,
so what's
and for that matter, the other extreme right people who are in his coalition government now.
So what's the alternative if Sharon and his group are not interested in really resuming the peace talks, and the Palestinians insist on completing the negotiations to have full withdrawal of the Israeli occupation and sovereignty and dealing with the refugee issues? Something has to give.
That is the fear that is behind my feeling personally, that we in Jordan are really becoming very, very sensitive about what's going on. You see what I mean? Because the amount of violence that we witnessed so far is of a proportion that has never been done before. We never witnessed such amount of unified front on the Palestinian side. That was an issue, or that was a phenomena that made every one of us happy, but I'm sure it made the other party completely sad, because on the field of the Intifada, down at the leaderships of the field of the daily works of the Intifada, you feel that the Palestinian nation and the nationhood is one behind ending occupation of the Israeli occupying forces.
Yes.
Now, this is something that cannot be thwarted easily. And if Sharon and the right in Israel insist on delaying techniques to really obstruct the peace process from delivering, delivering something, then I think the amount of Intifada works will be resumed.
In terms of violence, shooting.
And this time it will be back to using firearms, using Hawan or whatever available is to them, and it will become really very serious. And I think that the West in particular, the European Union, and the Americans, I believe now, and the Russians and the Japanese and everybody, they are telling directly or indirectly the Israeli government that if things this time go out of hand, the whole region, the security of the whole region will be jeopardized.
Yeah.
And I believe for us in Jordan, we will be the first, hopefully not, to suffer.
But is this why the Jordanian government recently made this new ruling to restrict the movement of Palestinians into Jordan across the bridges?
The fact that it came at this particular time made me believe that this is probably is behind it. This kind of thinking is behind it. Why? Because as I remember, the statement that the Minister of Interior, Awad Khalifat, made yesterday, made it very clear that this is a temporary measure, meaning that expectations are not really good, you see, and that something might happen that is completely contrary to what we hope will actually take place. Now, in this case, when you look at the green card, so-called green card carriers, they are Palestinians.
That means the Palestinians who lived
who live there,
since
and who cannot have a permanent residence in the kingdom unless it is justified, like being under medication or a student or joining his family here for a while, something of the sort. And it has been done on very humane and very nice basis all the time. Now, I have all the belief deep inside that our government, the Ministry of Interior, is taking a temporary measure. It depends on how things develop. And I think with the exceptions that I read about who will be exempted from taking a prior permission to visit the kingdom from Palestine, it will be tolerable, in my opinion, and we will have to both cooperate, Palestinians and Jordanians, in tolerating this as a temporary measure only.
But let me ask you, we only have a couple of minutes left. Are you concerned, do you think the Jordanian government is concerned about angry young unemployed Palestinians coming here and perhaps causing instability or turmoil here in Jordan, or are they worried about the Israelis trying to have a mass exodus of Palestinians to get the Palestinians out of Palestine, as some people say?
To be frank with you, when you have inhibitions, you and I, when we have inhibitions, we sometimes cannot be very specific in saying what is actually really behind our inhibitions. I believe that we are a little bit inhibited here, that something wrong might happen. The situation might become more volatile than it has been for the last 9 months. Now, why don't we think of a measure that can be reduced to only the necessity, and to make exemptions for all those who should come, like students and medical and transit people who go to work, and then sleep a little bit better, sleep well, until we see what happens on the ground. I think the inhibitions are there. But to really be very specific about what is it exactly that has made the government take this decision, I think it is very general.
Some people
cannot specify.
Some people say that Sharon and many people on the right wing in Israel have never given up the idea of throwing the Palestinians out and putting them, solving them somewhere else.
True, I believe in that, but the confidence in the Palestinian individual per se, and in the Palestinian national and communal philosophy now is contrary to that. What has been happening for the last 9 months is tremendously unacceptable. It is too much by any measures. It's war. It's using F-16s and helicopters and gunships and all these kinds of things. And the situation is good. There are people who couldn't return, but they wanted to return. The closure was on the Israeli side. So it is the closure, it is the Israeli daily blockades and blockades at the bridges and the airport and all these facilities that make it possible for people to return, that making part of the inhibition, I think, with the people who decided to take that decision on getting people with the green cards to have a permission prior to their visit to the kingdom.
Marwan Dudin, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for your thoughts and analysis as always, and good luck. That's Encounter. Thank you for being with us. Join me again next week at the same time. Bye for now.